Hello and welcome to the Wrap, WRAL's weekly-ish look at everything that happened this week in North Carolina politics. I'm Travis Fain, one of WRAL's state government reporters.
And I am Will Doran, another state government reporter.
All right, you got two state government reporters. We're going to knock this thing out of the park. We're going to start with, where else, Will? Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson has thoughts on the civil rights movement.
What has he said this time, Travis?
Well, so CNN seems to be going through a review of his social media posts and various media appearances going back 5 years. How guided that is by opposition research someone might have handed them, I don't know. But they came across a 2018 right-wing conspiracy theorist podcast that the lieutenant governor was on, wherein he said that the civil rights movement was a communist plot to subvert capitalism and to, quote, subvert free choice and where you go to school and things like that. And here's probably the money quote, Will. Quote, this is, again, the first black lieutenant governor of North Carolina, Mark Robinson, quote, so many things were lost during the civil rights movement. So many freedoms were lost during the civil rights movement. They shouldn't have been lost.
Should probably point out that he and people like him wouldn't be able to vote without the civil rights movement.
It's quite the statement and series of statements. I mean, he was bashing the sit-ins at one point. He said, you know, he's from Greensboro, which is where, of course, the Woolworth sit-ins occurred, and it's quite world famous for it, the movement for integration there. And he said that he called the sit-ins crazy. He said, that's not what you do in a free market system. What you do in a free market system is you just say, hey, guys, these guys don't treat people fair. Do not eat there. I don't think that would work. I mean, we're recording this podcast in a room at WRAL. There's only two white guys in here. Far be it from us to lecture anybody of color about the civil rights movement or racism, but the lieutenant governor just kind of continues to be outside of certainly mainstream thought on these things.
Yeah, and this is another instance of him going on a podcast kind of in the, when he first started gaining fame in conservative circles and was kind of ramping up his first run. I mean, we see, he went on another podcast with the leader of the Moonies group and, talked about how, Jewish people are conspiring with the CIA in China to control the world government. There's just been kind of this tendency to let his mouth get ahead of him. And I think what we've seen so far from his campaign this time around, at least, is a very concerted attempt to not go down that same path again. He's been much more scripted in what he said and what he hasn't said, on the abortion bill that we're going to talk about in a second. He's just completely just refused to comment on that. Yeah,
won't take a position on the abortion, but it's like with the campaign this time, he's trying to be disciplined about it, but without ever apologizing for any of this stuff he's now trying not to say, which that doesn't work like that. That doesn't compute. The lieutenant governor, I mean, and also the podcast as he's going, just to go on some of these fringe podcasts would have been shocking if we were in like a pre-Trump environment, I guess. I mean, things are always evolving, but it's not only to go on. I mean, we could create some sort of algorithmic Mark Robinson quote generator where like it just picks words at random. Like CIA could be one word, television could be one word, the Jews could be a phrase. It's stuff that is disconcerting, I think, to say the least. But hey, it's a representative government. We get to pick whoever we want to represent us. The lieutenant governor has not commented on CNN's story that I have seen. He did, however, publish a video with Clarence Henderson, who is a civil rights icon in Greensboro, who has also supported a number of Republicans over the years. And he said, he looked at Clarence in the video and said, I couldn't be more proud of your work in the civil rights movement, and ended the video by saying, I tell you what, you made history in the state once. I'm going to make history again. Henderson spoke to one of our colleagues, Chris Levengood, here at WRAL after the CNN story came out and said he stood by the lieutenant governor, continues to support him, despite the lieutenant governor, I mean, basically bashing the civil rights movement back in these 2018 comments. So,
yeah, and I mean, even the sit-ins, which Henderson was a part of.
Right. Specifically mentioning them. Media Matters also reported something today. We're recording this on Friday. That the lieutenant governor in a 2019 interview said mass shootings are karma for abortions, that because our society allows abortions, that's why we have mass shootings. There's a little bit to unpack there, but I would start with that's not how karma works. If an innocent person dies, another innocent person totally unrelated to that situation does not die because of karma. That's not how that works.
This is the theology podcast with Travis Vane.
I don't know much about karma, but I know that's not how it works. Speaking of the governor's race, the 2024 governor's race, because, of course, the lieutenant governor is running for governor, former Congressman Mark Walker will have an announcement May 20th in Kernersville. Well, he's going to announce, he hasn't said it's for governor, but it's about the governor's race. We assume he's going to say, I'm running.
Yeah, he has teased this very heavily over the past month or so, saying he's thinking about it. People have been asking him to do it. He's been praying on it, whether or not he should, but it's just been kind of this slow trickle of leaks and, half statements that seem to be leading up to an announcement. Not to bring it back to Robinson, but, Walker is actually kind of the one who launched Robinson's career in the
Certainly
first place.
Helped, yeah.
He shared the now famous video of the guns rights speech that Robinson gave in Greensboro, and which put him on the map in the first place. So it could be interesting to see him going from almost a political patron of sorts to potential political opponent now.
Yeah, both from Guilford County. And when Walker was running for the U.S. Senate last year, Robinson appeared with him at multiple events, was very complimentary of him, never endorsed him, but, said things nice enough to where I was calling and saying, hey, are you endorsing? And it just hadn't happened. And then as Ted Budd pulled away in that Republican primary and left former Governor Pat McCrory and former Congressman Mark Walker kind of in the dust, Robinson endorsed Budd. I don't think that went over too well with Walker, who felt like they had been buddies. At any rate, though, the general wisdom from Chris Cooper, a Western Carolina political scientist, is that this helps Mark Robinson because also in that race on the Republican side is State Treasurer Dale Folwell. And if the idea is, well, there are two types of Republican voters, those who want Mark Robinson and those who do not think he can win a general election because of the stuff we've been talking about at the beginning of the show here. For those folks, they now have two options. They have Mark Walker and Dale Folwell. It'll split the vote. That's what Cooper says.
Well, it's very similar to the national dynamics with the presidential race in Trump. You essentially have the Trump vote and the anti-Trump vote. And, if that gets split multiple ways, then that helps Trump.
Meanwhile, Governor Roy Cooper, no relation that I'm aware of to Chris Cooper, the political analyst, Governor Roy Cooper traveling the state, rallying against the abortion bill, which he's going to veto on Saturday, and trying to push the public to reach out to four key Republicans, Will.
Yeah, this is, I think, a real long shot, anyone would acknowledge, but it just comes down to the math here. Cooper no longer has the block in the legislature of Democrats being able to hold the line on vetoes. Republicans have supermajorities in both chambers, so in order for this veto to survive and to block the abortion bill from becoming law, Cooper needs at least one Republican to flip and basically turn on the party, not do this. And he's identified four that he thinks, he could have a shot at maybe getting voters to pressure. Cooper has said that he hasn't really reached out to these people himself. He thinks that that's probably not the best strategy for him. He just wants their constituents to give them calls.
He wants people to yell at them. He doesn't want to call and yell at them. Okay, good luck.
Yeah, I don't know. We're not here to talk about the wisdom of that political strategy or not, but one of them is John Bradford, Charlotte area Republican, who specifically said, "Look, I don't think Cooper could pick me out of a crowd." He said, the governor has consistently snubbed me on some issues. He pointed to some bill signings on bills that he had sponsored that Cooper signed and had a big ceremony for, but didn't invite Bradford to. And he was like, look, I don't owe this guy any favors. And in fact, I'm kind of mad at him.
Yeah, Bradford was a little salty about it. Another is Senator Michael Lee, who is in the traditional swing seat, Senate seat down in Wilmington. And the reason the governor picked these people is because they have said something in the past. They've campaigned against certain abortion restrictions. Obviously, that's a range. And Lee says, look, this bill is well within what I promised I would do. Also, he has targeted Tricia Cotham, who was, a Democrat a month and a half ago, and an impassioned supporter of abortion rights in the past, who now seems poised to be, that key vote to pass these new abortion restrictions into law.
I mean, it was so shocking to a lot of people when Cotham, because of her history, actually voted for this abortion bill. I mean, there's no way that she's going to do yet another 180 and now, vote to override the bill. I don't know. She won't return our calls or emails about it when we ask.
Right.
So, we just have to kind of guess at what's going to happen. But
what you're saying makes sense. Ted Davis, though, also in Wilmington in the House, we usually would say he took a walk on the bill. He did not vote. We know he was in the House chamber earlier that day, was not in the House chamber when the abortion bill was voted on. He's been a no comment since on what he'll do.
And he, except for Cotham, had the most explicit stance of any of them, saying, look, I think our current 20-week ban is fine. I would not support it becoming less than that. And obviously this bill not only moves it from 20 weeks down to 12 weeks, but also adds a whole host of other restrictions. And Davis was pretty clear, and he even said in a debate, he's like, look, I don't care if House Speaker Tim Moore pressures me to vote for something like this. I'm not going to do it. Like, the speaker's not my boss. The voters are my boss. And, I don't think my voters want this. So, I mean, he had some pretty strong statements. And, he did keep to his word originally. He was the only House Republican not to vote for this bill. But, now there's a second test to see what he does this time.
And at the end of the day, Republicans can let this thing sit in the veto garage if Davis or any other Republican doesn't want to vote for it, and just wait until there are a couple of Democrats absent, and then they can they'll have the numbers and they can push it through that way. So I mean, at the end of the day, Bradford, Cotham, Lee, and Davis, it's only relevant until it's not. So in the meantime, the governor has a rally planned for 10 a.m. Saturday, a veto rally. It's a Mother's Day weekend, so I mean they're holding an abortion rights rally on Mother's Day weekend, which a lot of people on the right are pointing. Kind of walked into that one, and part of me wonders if the reason Republicans pushed this bill forward so quickly, I mean maybe this is giving him too much credit, but to have him veto this abortion bill on Mother's Day weekend, it's an interesting talking point at least. There is a pro-life rally, also 10 a.m., same basic location down there out in front of the General Assembly. We don't know the timing yet on when the state Senate, which will easily override the governor's veto once it comes down. We don't know when that is. I asked this morning, Friday morning. I would assume fairly quickly, but I don't know.
I'd imagine they would do it pretty much immediately. Like you were saying just a second ago, the House is going to be the bigger question, if it's even a question at all. If there's going to be a question on whether the veto succeeds, it'll happen in the House, not
of course.
In the
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that bill, there's a bunch of other stuff in that bill, the abortion bill, Senate Bill 20, including a loophole on guns and domestic violence that you've written about before but got kind of wedged into this bill. I assume because gun rights opponents didn't want to see it in a separate bill, but they can't really complain if it passes as part of an abortion bill.
Yeah, no, and this is part of it. We're obviously focusing on a lot of what the bill does in terms of further restricting abortions, but there is a lot in it that's also aimed towards being pro-women. There's extra money for childcare subsidies, and there's this thing which ends this loophole that the legislature just created to basically around stopping domestic abusers from getting guns. We had been able to stop them in the past through pistol purchase permits that the sheriffs sign off on, but we just eliminated those. I think it was in March. And so now we have to find a new way to stop abusers from getting guns. And they had tried to put this fix in. It's basically creating a specific crime of domestic violence that is able to get flagged in the federal background check system, which we don't have.
Because of the way we define domestic violence, or don't define it rather, in our code versus what the feds require for it to be flagged in the NICS system, the National Instant Criminal. I don't know what NICS stands for. It's the background check system when you go buy a gun.
Yeah, NICS. Yeah.
Not Stevie Nicks, who I believe is playing PNC Arena tonight. But I'm sorry. I've gotten continue, please.
But yeah, so when the gun bill first came through, the House tried to put this fix. I mean, they knew from the start that this was a loophole they were creating that would, in fact, make it easier for domestic abusers to get guns. So they tried to fix it originally, but then the gun lobby just really, really strongly opposed that. They said, we don't support anything that's going to, block people from getting guns. even as distasteful as that sort of vote might be. And so, you know what? That provision of the bill magically disappeared before it passed. But here it is back in the abortion bill. And again, to kind of help Republicans with that talking point of, we do have pro-women things in here too. It's not just about, restrictions on healthcare issues and abortion.
Moving on, the State Board of Elections has 3 new members: Alan Hirsch, Shaban Millen, and Kevin Lewis. Hirsch is the new chair. Leaving, former chairman Damon Circosta, former state senator Tommy Tucker, and then Stella Anderson, who's an App State professor and has been a really heavily involved member of the state board. Karen Brinson Bell will remain the director. Jeff Carmen and 4 Eggers are staying on the board. It's still a 3-2 board in favor of Democrats versus Republicans, but there was some intrigue with Anderson's lack of reappointment, right?
Yeah, our colleague Laura Leslie had a really interesting story on this that I'd encourage people to go read if they hadn't. She called up Anderson, just kind of as you do when someone's leaving a board like this, just be like, hey, everything all good, and she said, actually, no. Anderson told her that she wanted to stay on the board, but had gotten word that the Republican Party was planning to sue if Cooper had renominated her. And so she was told kind of at the last minute, it sounded like, that she would be leaving the board and not appointed. And this dates back to a law that Republicans passed in 2018 saying that no government employees can serve on the elections board. And as you mentioned, she's an App State professor. And so she has been grandfathered in because she was already on the board when that law first passed. So she got grandfathered in, but apparently word came down through the grapevine
that there would be a challenge, or that there might be a challenge. It was a little
unclear. And, the GOP kind of confirmed that they were looking into it a little bit, but, didn't really say too much about it. So we don't know all of the details, but clearly it sounds like the governor's people thought that Republicans were going to mount this legal challenge to fight her. And they thought, are we going to, get involved with this whole huge lawsuit, right before the 2024 elections, when the board needs to be focusing on other things, that actually deal with the administration of elections, or should we just kind of take this loss and move on?
Yeah, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze ultimately for the governor, so they just didn't reappoint her.
Yeah, I should note Anderson has been, I would say, one of the more active members of that board in the past few years in terms of, really digging into the details of election administration issues and, knowing kind of like the nitty gritty of it. So, the Democrats will certainly feel her loss there, but, the board continues on. Hirsch, I believe, is a former top aide to Mike Easley when he was in both the AG's office and the governor's office. So he's been around in Democratic politics for a very long time, knows a lot of people.
Meanwhile, a General Assembly Elections Committee met also this week, which was kind of notable because almost no General Assembly committees met this week. They might have been the only one. And they were talking about SB 248, which would reduce the number of seats on the Nash County School Board from 11 to 7. And change the districts that the board members are elected from. And this does not appear to be supported by the Nash County School Board. So this is another one of those where the Republican legislature is saying, for whatever reason, we're going to change something about local government. It happens a lot. I don't know much more about that bill, but if you're interested in Nash County politics, our colleague Keenan Willard wrote a story about it.
Oh, and I did too.
Well, there you go.
It all goes back to redistricting, basically. The school board is worried. The school board is currently majority black. The county commissioners in Nash County are currently majority white. This bill would force the school board to use the same districts that the county commission does.
Well, there you go. Quickly, the North Carolina GOP convention. The Republicans will convention it up in Greensboro June 10th. Big names, Will. They got some big names coming.
They got all of the names coming.
If you're polling above 4% in the Republican presidential primary, you've been invited. It looks like.
Yeah, Ron DeSantis is going to kick it off Friday night with a speech, and then Saturday afternoon we're going to hear from Mike Pence, and then Saturday evening Donald Trump. So it'll be interesting, especially that Saturday crowd. I'm not sure that any more the if there's any sort of overlap between people who want to come to an event to hear Mike Pence speak and people who want to come to an event to hear Donald Trump speak, I'm not sure that there's anyone in the Republican Party left.
They'll be separated by about 6, 7. Well, I doubt the president will be on time, so they'll be separated by quite a few hours. It should be fine. Hopefully they won't have to be in a room together. And I don't know that Pence is polling over 4% or whatever figure I just threw out there. So
we'll see. Send us your polls if you've got them.
Nah, don't do that. Senate budget will be rolling out. There is a 3 p.m. Monday press conference, 8:30 a.m. Tuesday morning. The Senate budget will be in Appropriations Committee. I don't know what's in it, but we're going to find out.
Yeah, I think it's safe to assume that there will probably be less spending and more tax cuts than whatever the House rolled out earlier this year, but the exact details we'll learn more Monday and Tuesday.
We'll have to wait and see. Meanwhile, revenue's still looking good. $33.62 billion is what we expect to take in this fiscal year, which ends June 30th. That's like $136 million less than like they thought in February, but it's still $3 billion and change more than we thought we'd be getting last summer, which is kind of when this estimation process. The revenue's looking real good. That's, I think, the bottom line there.
That's always good news.
Moore v. Harper, you got 30 seconds to talk about this dadgum lawsuit at the United States Supreme Court. I'm starting the clock now.
All right. If people don't know what Moore v. Harper is, just go Google it. Independent state legislature theory. We have written many thousands of words. As Travis has indicated, it is incredibly complex. It's this Supreme Court lawsuit out of North Carolina. And actually, because the Supreme Court of the state Supreme Court just reversed itself, there's a big question right now as to whether the U.S. Supreme Court still even needs to bother hearing this case. I mean, something that critics say could destroy democracy, and supporters say, nah, it's fine. It won't do that. And it could just be that the Supreme Court's going to just kick the can down the road on this one. So we'll see.
They asked for briefing. They've asked for more briefing on this twice, right?
Correct.
To me, if you're asking everyone's opinion about should we just not do anything, and you ask twice.
But the really interesting thing is, and I know I'm going over my 30 seconds you gave me, but on Thursday when these briefs came in, most of the parties said, yeah, y'all should just get rid of this case, dismiss it. And I mean, that includes the Biden administration, that includes the state government, that includes a lot of the private people who sued over this. But there's two people on opposite sides of this case who both want the Supreme Court to hear this. That's the Republican legislature and the anti-gerrymandering group Common Cause. So they clearly have, different math on who they think won. It sounds like both those groups think that they won, and that can't be possible since they argued very opposite arguments. But they both want the Supreme Court to just go ahead and do this, kind of rip the Band-Aid off before we get into the heat of the election season. So, the court does have options here.
Court's got options. We'll look forward to next week. I got a story coming Monday morning about vacancies in state government. No surprise, there are a lot of them. What I did find interesting is that the State Office of Human Resources says applications for state agency jobs are down 43% if you compare 2019 to 2022. They're estimating that turnover in state government costs the state like $500 million a year. Scenic, that's a state employees association, says, hey, you know what we could do? We could give people raises and save that $500 million that we're wasting in turnover. Just use that for raises. And of course, budget writers say it's not quite that simple, but you can look for that story. I'm also working on a story about authorization of hurricane programs. The bottom line there is it seems like a simple change that the federal government could make would chop just months and months and months off the lead time for these grant programs, the CDBG-DR disaster recovery programs that the Housing and Urban Development Department gives down to the states to rebuild people's houses. Look for the story coming. I talked to Senator Tom Tillis about it.
It's been awful. I mean, people are still waiting to get money to fix their homes from the hurricanes that we had in, 2016?
2016 and 2018. Now, a lot of that is the state. The Governor Roy Cooper's administration's kind of failure to advance those projects as quickly as people expected has been well documented. And when I say documented, I mean they're literally, WRAL did a documentary about it. And shout out to Lisa Sorg at NC Policy Watch, who was all over that story. But this is like before state and local governments get the money.
There's even more delays from the feds.
Because the feds have to write rules. But they wouldn't have to write so many rules if the state, if the federal government would authorize this program. So we're kind of reinventing the wheel over and over again, even though this program's existed since 1993. I also sat down with Senator Tom Tillis on a number of issues this week. No immediate plans to endorse the 2024 governor's race. Absolutely won't be a candidate himself, he says. Sees a recession coming based on data he reviews as a member of the banking and the finance committees in the United States Senate, so feel free to be scared about that. Fort Bragg needs hundreds of millions of dollars to address barracks and other issues. He toured the barracks recently. He expects Congress to pass new subsidies to support early child care. That's an industry that is about to lose some pandemic-era federal support. He expects some number to be up there. Also, no state has qualified for the federal funding that Congress passed last year to help implement red flag gun laws. That's a bill that he was involved with. Looks like nobody has cleared that bar. I thought that was interesting. You can read the Q&A online, although I think I just told you all the news in it. So
I'm interested in that red flag story. That's obviously something that North Carolina has not been interested in pursuing, but the fact that no states have done it, that was big national news at the time.
So some have passed red flag laws, but not to the standard that is required to get the federal funding.
Yeah.
I think that bill was probably had more rules in it than I, at least as a reading member of the general public, understood at the time. So Lena Tillett hosting On the Record this week. It's about abortion, the abortion bill. I believe it will feature some of the very tense debate that we saw in the state Senate at 7 p.m. Saturday on WRAL. It replays 8:30 a.m. on Fox 50. That's about it. Next week, Senator Rachel Hunt and Representative Julie Von Hafen and North Carolina Democrats in general have an education policy press conference. That's on Tuesday. House elections and House health meet Tuesday morning. And as we mentioned, the budget rolls out. That's about all I got.
Going to be a busy Tuesday.
Always a busy Tuesday. All right. We appreciate your time. Thanks for listening. We hope you have a nice day.